What is up, guys, man? Listen, I'm hoping y'all are having a good Thursday night. But like I said, man, we had to move this up a night. We got some big Friday night games for the FCS playoffs this weekend. But listen, this is our round two preview. We're giving full predictions for all the round two FCS playoff games. Make sure to comment yours in the chat, man. Let me know what you're going to be watching for all these big games. But excuse me, but last week a bunch of teams had buys, man. We got to see what some of these first round teams got in terms of at large bids, but now all the seeded teams are here to play. We're going to find out who's the favorite potentially to take home the FCS national title, man. But listen, comment your questions as well at the end of the show, man. We'll probably spend about 20-30 minutes worth of time of answering your questions about the FCS playoffs or anything else going on in college football. But man, let's waste no time. We have Holy Cross traveling to Villanova in our first matchup, 6 p.m. Central Time on ESPN Plus on Friday night, man. What is up? What is up, man? Appreciate you tuning in. But, man, Holy Cross traveling to Villanova, 13-point favorite for Villanova, 6 p.m. Central Time, ESPN Plus, like I said. But to break this one down, let's address Holy Cross first, the big underdogs, 10-2 this year. They escaped a very tough game against Sacred Heart. A lot of people thought Holy Cross was going to be able to walk through that Sacred Heart team, but their offense really struggled all game long, only really mustering any offensive momentum on their last drive when it was like a Hail Mary attempt to their big wide receiver, and he goes and makes a play in double coverage, and they win on that touchdown with only about 20 seconds left. But Sacred Heart gave them a lot of trouble in that front seven. Holy Cross could not get anything established on the offensive side of the ball. And when you look at their offense this year, they've averaged over 400 yards per game. And last week, it just wasn't there for them, man. I mean, to be completely honest with you, they had one of their worst offensive outputs of their season. And they're very, very balanced, though, man. Just over 203 yards passing, just over 207 on the ground. So that's where they really thrive, is when this offense can run the ball and the pass game can work off of that. But listen, QB Matthew Solka, man, is going to be the X factor for Holy Cross on the offensive side of the ball. He drives everything on the offensive side of the ball for them. Over 1,300 passing yards, 11 touchdowns. Their leading rusher, man, over 700 yards rushing, 13 rushing touchdowns. He does it all for this offense. So if Matthew Solka has a big game, they got a chance, man. They really do. Holy Cross has a chance when Matthew Solka plays a good game. And then on top of that, they need a big game from Jalen Coker at the wide receiver spot. He came in clutch down the stretch, but most of the time Sacred Heart locked him up. The Sacred Heart had a great secondary performance last weekend. So Jalen Coker, their leading wide receiver this year, has to have a big game, and Peter Oliver has to help Solka out, establishing something on the ground. And for their defense, man, they got to play discipline. They got a very, very tough matchup with Villanova, who really is also a balanced team. So these linebackers are going to have to be disciplined. And listen, cornerback John Smith is my X factor this weekend for Holy Cross, man. 5 interceptions this year, 6 pass breakups. He's by far been their best DB on this defense. And then also Liam Anderson and Jacob Dobbs at the linebacker spot, man. These guys have combined for over 200 total tackles this year. They've also combined for almost 40 tackles for loss and almost 20 combined sacks this year. So Dobbs and Anderson at that linebacking spot is going to be real key for this defense against this strong Villanova offense. Now, for people who haven't, I know some people in here have not watched a lot of FCS football, man. What is up, Sean? Appreciate you tuning in, my guy. But for Villanova, they've really been a quiet team up in the top 10 all year long. 9-2. They got the first round bye. They got seeded this year. And when you look at how they did it, guys, when you really look at what carried this team here, it's their defense. Villanova is a defensive team that is going to use their defense to win a football game, and only 15 points per game allowed this year, less than 255 yards allowed per game, less than 100 yards rushing, and less than 170 yards passing. They can do it a multitude of ways on the defensive side of the ball. And when you look at where it starts, man, it really starts with Forrest Ryan at the linebacker spot. 110 tackles this year, 5.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. And then his right-hand man, Amin Black, plays in the backfield at such a high level, man. 11.5 tackles for loss this year. He's up over 75 tackles for the year. And then for every great defense, everyone knows this. Every great defense has that shutdown corner. That is Christian Benford for this Villanova team, man. 7 picks, and guys, I just want to get the stat across. 16 plays on the ball. 16 plays where he either broke up a pass, got a pass deflection. 16 plays on the ball. This guy, if you throw at him, he's going to make a play. He's either going to pick it off or he's going to break it up. And Christian Benford has really been someone who has stepped up down the stretch for Villanova this year. And so the defense is going to be key. If they can slow down Holy Cross, and I think this defense is much better than the Sacred Heart defense that Holy Cross saw last week. I think that's going to be a problem for Holy Cross this weekend. And on the offensive side of the ball, man, it really starts with Justin Covington and Jalen Jackson at the running back spot, man. Both of them up over 500 yards rushing, both averaging over 6 yards per carry and 10 rushing touchdowns, man. Listen, the running game, if Villanova can control the pace of the game with the rushing attack and play stout defense, they should be able to cruise to a win this weekend in all actuality. They're the more talented team. It's a solid matchup for them in this second round. So for me, guys, my prediction in this one, I have Villanova beating Holy Cross this weekend, 35-23 this weekend. Moving on to the second round, or moving on to the third round, man. So Villanova gets a big win in this round. Let's see. Sean said, man, Villanova shouldn't even be an FCS football team. So yes, they should. Villanova is a basketball school, man. Listen, the basketball team is the face of the program, man. But listen, I'll rank these in order of when they're going to be played. Our other Friday night game. Listen, this game was so big earlier this season that it was flexed to ESPN2 in like week 7. So this went heads up with FBS games and was such a big top 5 matchup that they got flexed to ESPN2 in primetime. Eastern Washington traveling to Montana for the rematch that I think everybody who's a big FCS football fan, especially a big Sky fan, should be looking forward to. This is going to be, in my opinion, I think this has the potential to easily be the game of the week, man. Easily. And Montana's a 3-point favorite. They lost to Eastern Washington earlier this year on the red turf up there in Washington, but now Eastern Washington's got to go into Montana. And listen, if you don't know, if you're not a huge, FCS like national fan, like you just have a favorite team or a favorite conference, Montana is one of the most intimidating FCS environments in the playoffs, especially with the weather, with the way the stadium's designed, with the crowd noise. I mean, Montana's got a legit home field advantage when it comes to FCS playoff time. So I'm expecting a very, very tough matchup, man. Montana, like I said, 3-point favorite, 8 p.m. Central Time tomorrow night, Friday night. And we'll start with Eastern Washington, man. They escaped UNI round 1, 19-9 in the first round. Listen, and I said on the recap, man, to see Eastern Washington win a defensive struggle was interesting, man, because if you would have told me that Eastern Washington scored 19 points, I would have said they probably wouldn't have won that game. I mean, 19 points is way below the average of over 44 points per game for this offense. And you look at what they usually do this year, man, over 550 yards per game this season. Eastern Washington has that type of offense that is game changing, really and truly. And listen, if you don't know who I'm picking as my X factor for this game, you have not watched the channel, you haven't watched Eastern Washington football, it's gonna have to be Eric Barrier, man. In my opinion, I think he should be the Walter Award winner. Now, you can make an argument for Cole Kelly if you want, but for me, man, Eric Barrier, 4,500 passing yards this year, 41 passing touchdowns, only 7 turnovers and 4 rushing touchdowns. Eric Barrier has just been like the fact that he's still doing this and has done it consistently year in and year out is just outstanding, man. If he has a big game, Eastern Washington is going to be a hard team to get out of the playoffs, man. Because if this team goes as he goes, but for me, another key for them this weekend is to get Dennis Merritt going on the ground, man. The rushing attack has to be there for Eastern Washington. The balance has to be there because of how good this defense is that they're going up against. Merritt, man, 14 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns, and then also Chim at the wide receivers pass big. Eastern Washington as well, man. 9 receiving touchdowns this year, over 700 yards receiving. Eric Barrier likes to spread the ball around, but for me, you have to have a big game for Chisholm, man. That's really going to be one of the top targets for Eric Barrier this weekend. And of course, The question mark always surrounding Eastern Washington from fans and analysts is, can the defense play well enough to win? They did earlier this season at home. They forced a few turnovers and really got ahead of Montana down the stretch. But this defense still is allowing over 25 points per game, and they are going to have to play better than what they played week 7 because I believe Montana has improved since this first matchup. Now, Todd Graham and Jack Sindelbach for Eastern Washington, of course, are the main guys. Listen, Sindelbach is one of the best linebackers at the FCS levels. Graham's had an outstanding year. They've combined for almost 200 tackles, guys, almost 20 tackles for loss. And on top of that, man, Graham can drop back in coverage and be a factor as well. And then the other player, man, I really want to address this. They have to play in the backfield. That defensive line for Eastern Washington has to be big, has to play big this weekend. They really have to try to get some pressure. They have to try to slow down this rushing attack. Mitchell Johnson is going to be a guy I'm going to be watching very closely this weekend. 5.5 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss. He has 4 QB hurries, 2 forced fumbles. Mitchell Johnson is going to be someone I want to see if he can step up this weekend for Eastern Washington's defense. Now, Montana, man, 9-2. They get seeded, get a first round bye, and it's really on the back of their defense, man. Let me just be honest with you guys. 13 points per game allowed, less than 290 yards per game allowed. Listen, guys, they're only allowing 74 rushing yards per game this season. And the key is going to be, can the secondary step up and slow down Eric Berrier? You look at a guy like a Justin Ford that's on this Montana defense that I think gets overshadowed sometimes, man. 8 interceptions, and he has 22 plays on the ball, man. Whether it's a pass breakup, whether it's a deflection, man, Justin Ford can be that guy that could probably take one of these guys one-on-one, and he's going to have to take it away from Eric Berrier. And on top of that, you look at someone like a Petrie O'Connell up front for Montana. He's going to have a big game. I mean, this guy has 91 tackles, 19.5 tackles for loss, and 13 sacks this season, man. This guy has been playing outstanding football, and if he can be a force on that in that front for Montana, it really could give Eastern Washington a lot of problems. And then, of course, Marcus Wellnell at the linebacker spot also has to have a big game, and he's more as a coverage linebacker. I don't think he gets enough credit, man. Listen, he's got 3 picks, 7 pass breakups, but he also has 6 sacks and 10 tackles for loss. He's really just an all-around great linebacker, man. You can drop him into coverage and trust him. And if you're facing a run-first team, and you can trust well enough to get in the backfield and go make some plays for you up front. And on the offensive side of the ball, man, they're going to have Cam Humphrey to have a big game. Montana's they cannot turn the ball over. Turnovers really cost them that first game. Cam Humphrey and this offense has to keep the ball in their possession. They cannot give Eric Berrier extra possessions, and they cannot allow the crowd to get out of it. If Montana establishes their game plan, goes down there and scores early, that crowd is going to be raucous, and I think Eastern Washington is going to be facing a lot of problems. Put pressure on Eric Berrier to keep scoring. You have to keep pressure on Eastern Washington to keep scoring, because if you get behind them and you got all the pressure, I think you're going to be in a bad spot if you're Montana. Now, for me, man, it's so hard to go to beat a team twice, man. It really is. I don't think people understand how hard it is to beat a team twice in the same season. But for me, I told you guys last week, when I have a close matchup like this where I'm kind of 50-50 on, I'm always going with the better quarterback. For me, I think Eric Berrier finds a way to pull this one out. I do think it's a back and forth close game, a little bit lower scoring than you would imagine, but I got Eastern Washington winning this one 31-27 over Montana, pulling the upset on the road and advancing to the quarterfinals next week. So Eastern Washington with a big win this weekend, 4-point win over Montana on the road. Now, the other game that meant another big game, and listen, East Tennessee State hosting Kennesaw State this weekend in a big matchup at 1 p.m. Central Time on ESPN Plus this Saturday. Kennesaw State is actually the favorite according to most lines, 2.5-point favorite from the one I was using for this game, man. But listen, Kennesaw State last weekend put on a dominant performance, a 48-21 win over Davidson in the first round, 11-1 on the year. And listen, if you don't know what this offense does, they're going to run the football. I mean, they're going to run it at you, and they're going to play stout defense, and that is how they're going to wear you down and beat you down. Listen, last week they jumped out to, I believe, a 20-0 lead over Davidson. If you're ETSU, you cannot let Kennesaw you cannot let Kennesaw get a lead. If you let Kennesaw get an early lead on you, you are going to be in major trouble if you're ETSU. So for me, the key, of course, is stopping Xavier Shepherd. He's been electric this year with his legs and his limited passing attempts. They run it's a run first off. Let's just be honest. It's an option offense. They're not going to throw the ball a lot, but when they do, Shepherd has been extremely efficient, man. 15 touchdowns to only 3 turnovers, but his 23 rushing touchdowns really puts him over the top, man. This guy, if you let Kennesaw get in the red zone, they're going to put up points. And the number one thing for this offense is how explosive they are. You look at the running back, Ian Cousin, over 10 yards per carry, guys, this year in 12 games. 10 yards per carry, 4 rushing touchdowns. Shepherd already has 23. And then when they do put it in the air, you have a wide receiver like a Caleb O'Neal averaging over 17 yards per catch and 5 receiving touchdowns. So if you can't slow down the run of Kennesaw and slow down their time of possession and slow down and I guess get them off their rhythm. If Kennesaw gets in a rhythm, this game is going to get out of hand for ETSU. They have to find a way to slow down the rhythm of Kennesaw. And then on top of that, the defense has been extremely stout this year for Kennesaw, man. They're only allowing about 300 yards per game, less than 18 points per game this year. And it all starts, man. Evan Thompson at the linebacker spot for them, man. Over 100 tackles this year, 5 QB hurries, 3 pass breakups. Evan Thompson is so great at playing sideline to sideline and being very disciplined in his run defense. He's not going to over pursue. He's not going to get out of his gap integrity. He is going to make the play, be very disciplined. His vision is outstanding at that linebacker spot, and he's experienced and he's been in this moment. I don't think Evan Thompson is not going to show up this week. He's going to be an X factor. And then on top of that, you have someone like an Erwin Bird in the secondary. 2 picks, 3 pass breakups, by far been the most productive secondary player for Kennesaw. That's going to be another name to watch if ETSU puts this in the air a lot. And then when you look at ETSU, man, 10-1 first round bye, got the 7 seed. And it's really been their defense has been inconsistent at times, but has had some great outings. But it's been their offense averaging over 35 points per game, over 440 yards per game that has really led this team. And it's 2 guys. That's why I mentioned the linebacker spot being so important for Kennesaw. Quay Holmes and Jacob Sailors has been a problem at the running back spot for everybody. Holmes over 1,400 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns. Sailor, man, almost 1,000 yards rushing this year, over 7 yards per carry and 10 rushing touchdowns this year. Holmes and Sailors have really been the focal point of the offense, as Tyler Riddell hasn't put the ball in the air a lot. But for me, man, he's been efficient, over 63% of his completion percentage this year. On top of that, he has not turned the ball over, man. Only 3 picks this season with 16 passing touchdowns. Riddell, if he can be efficient, and listen, they're going to run the ball first, guys. They're going to be a rush first team, averaging over 240 on the ground. But can Riddell make the handful of throws he needs to keep Kennesaw's defense honest? That's going to be the biggest question for me, is can Riddell make those handful of throws? And when he's put in that position, can he deliver, when his name's called? And the defense has to have a good performance, man. Listen, they've had some that have been signature performances, but then there's also been other weeks where the defense really had to outscore people because the defense couldn't stop nobody. So for me, it really starts with Tyree Robinson in the secondary. He's going to shut down anything that Kennesaw tries to throw his way, man. 17 pass breakups, 5 picks. Tyree Robinson is a problem at the DB spot. But the main 2 guys, these are the X factors for me. 1, linebacker Donovan Manuel. He's experienced over 100 tackles this year, 3 sacks. Listen, if he is going to be the key of having to try to stop Xavier Shepherd. That's going to be his key. He's that linebacker that is going to have to play in Kennesaw's backfield. Listen, if he doesn't have a good game, Kennesaw's running away with this one. And then on top of that, Jalen Porter leads this defensive line, 10 tackles for loss and 6 sacks. Porter and Manuel are X factors on the defense, on the defensive front 7 for ETSU this weekend. The front 7 has to have a big game. If your front 7 is not disciplined against Kennesaw, they are going to run it down your throat. And you saw what happened last week early when Davidson was not ready for what Kennesaw was bringing. And they also allowed an extremely explosive play through the air, and you cannot allow that to happen. So for me, ETSU, I think, is going to give them a better game than a lot of people expect. But for me, I still think Kennesaw's defense makes a play or two here or there to get a few stops, and Kennesaw is just going to run the ball consistently down ETSU's throat. I have Kennesaw State winning this one 23-17, moving to the quarterfinals in the next round. Man, so I got Kennesaw State winning this one by 6. Now, this is a game I know a lot of the FAMU people who still might be tuned in. I know a lot of the SWAT people still rock with me. This is a game a lot of people are interested in because Southeastern moved on to take on James Madison. Sean's got ETSU for the win on that last game, man. Royce said doing a deep dive. Geez, facts on facts, man. Football junkie. I appreciate it, Royce, man. Thanks for tuning in, my guy. But listen, Southeastern Louisiana, James Madison, and James Madison is a 15-point favorite, guys. I mean, not many people are giving Southeastern a realistic shot at this one. 1 p.m. kickoff on ESPN Plus, and we'll start with Southeastern Louisiana, man. 9-3 this year. Just came off a big win over Florida A&M in the first round last week. And listen, I did a real deep dive in that game because of FAMU, man. All my FAMU people like Mr. Campbell, I had to get into that one. But the key is the offense. They're just going to try to outscore you, and their secondary is going to try to force a handful of turnovers to keep, their defense knows that they can go into a game and get probably 3-4 stops that they're winning it every time, because that's how consistent their offense has been all year, man. Over 47 points per game, 560 yards per game with over 400 yards passing per game. And the X factor, and I said it last week, any game that Southeastern Louisiana plays, the X factor is Cole Kelly. If he has a big game, they got a chance in every single one of them. And over 73% of his passes completed for over 4,700 yards, 42 passing touchdowns, and 16 rushing touchdowns with only 7 turnovers, man. Listen, Cole Kelly is a whole problem. His size at 6'7", like 250, 260, is a problem in the red zone. The creativity of the offensive play calling gives most defenses a lot of issues because they spread you out. They're going to leak the tight end out. They're going to leak the H-back out. The running back's going to bounce outside when they throw the ball, and your linebackers are going to have to play discipline. And last week, FAMU's linebackers didn't track anybody out of the backfield. Every time the tight end leaked out or the running back leaked out into the flats, there was nobody there. And so if Cole Kelly wasn't pushing the ball up the field, they were just dumping it off, and they were getting 10, 15 yards a pop. That cannot happen this weekend if you're James Madison. And Austin Mitchell, of course, is their main wide receiver, over 1,000 yards receiving. But for me, the other X factor, and he was the X factor last weekend, and he also was in a handful of games this year, Nolan Given, that the tight end. He's a matchup nightmare due to his size and athleticism, and he is that type of guy that's big-bodied, and he's not afraid to make catches over the middle in tight spaces. And in the red zone, you already have to worry about Kelly's running ability. Given is a problem in the red zone and one-on-one coverage, man. Given over 500 yards receiving, 6 receiving touchdowns. I think Nolan Given is going to be the X factor on the offensive side of the ball. And the number one player on defense, Zai Alexander's got to have a big game, man. He's really been one of the main contributors on this defense. 6 interceptions, 7 pass breakups as a freshman. He's an All-American this year. Zai Alexander for Southeastern has to have a big game this weekend. And also Alexis Ramos in the front 7, 71 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss. He's going to have a big game against this James Madison offense that is going to be extremely balanced, man. Listen, and for James Madison, I know a lot of people, that watch the show have been asking me about James Madison. There's been a few people who've come in the live stream and talked about him, man. But 10-1, got a first round bye, of course, one of the top seeds in the tournament, man, right now. But their offense is a problem, guys. Listen, for me, they have one of the most balanced teams in the playoff. When you look at their offense, almost 40 points per game, over 430 yards per game this year, and it starts with Cole Johnson at quarterback, man. He's probably the best quarterback in FCS that doesn't get talked about. When you look at what he's done this year, completed almost 70% of his passes, almost 3,000 yards, 32 passing touchdowns with only 2 picks, guys. 32 passing touchdowns with only 2 picks. He's been extremely efficient through the air, and they have one of the best wide receiving duos in the FCS with Antwain Wells Jr. and also Chris Thornton, man. These guys are match-up nightmares on the outside, and they're going to pick you apart. If you don't have two top corners that can guard them, it's going to be a long day for you trying to stop this James Madison offense, man. Wells, almost 1,000 yards receiving, 11 receiving touchdowns, while Thornton has almost 900 yards receiving and also has 11 receiving touchdowns, 22 receiving touchdowns between Wells and Thornton. Southeastern is going to have an answer, and that's why I think Zy Alexander is going to have a big game. He's their shutdown corner. Can he take one of these guys away from this offense and from Cole Johnson for James Madison? But the biggest problem for me, man, listen, I know FAMU's defense came in last week, ranked extremely high in the FCS in terms of total defense. In terms of overall size and physicality, I think what they're going to see in the front seven this weekend from James Madison is unlike anything else. I would say right now, James Madison has an argument to have the best front four in FCS right now, man. Listen, their defense allowing only 15 points per game, 250 yards per game allowed, less than 83 yards rushing. But listen, there's three names you need to know, all on the defensive line, and they're all my X factors because all three of these guys has the size to get to Cole Kelly. And I think they're going to really disrupt this passing game. They have to go with quick passes this weekend if you're Southeastern, because these three guys are problems. You look at Isaac Waku, 15 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 31 tackles. All-American Mike Green on the interior of that D-line, 9.5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. Was a first-team All-American last year. Missed some time early due to injury, but has really been bouncing back and should be almost at 100% coming into this weekend. Then, of course, Carter Bryce at defensive line, 16.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 7 QB hurries, and 3 forced fumbles. These three guys are, in terms of collection of defensive line talent, is unlike anything Southeastern has seen this year at the FCS level. And I really think it's going to cause a lot of problems for the Southeastern offensive line because, they shut down Isaiah Land last week, but he really and truly was the only elite pass rusher on that defensive line. Savion and Gentle Hunt made some plays due to them focusing on Land. You can't just focus on Isaac or Green or Bryce. You're going to have to block all three of these guys or they can wreck your game plan. These are game changers up front, and I think that's what makes James Madison's defense so good is they're so strong, big, physical, and fast in the front seven that it gives teams a lot of problems, man. I have not seen a team really dominate the line of scrimmage against James Madison. Maybe Villanova, but Villanova, for me, I think right now, if they were played again, I think I would probably take James Madison, to be completely honest with y'all. But listen, in this matchup, Cole Kelly, Southeastern had a great run, man. I think this defense for James Madison is too good. And I think, and last week, last week they faced a quarterback in Rashawn McKay that is unlike anything that Cole Johnson is going to bring. I think Cole Johnson is going to force this defense to make plays. He's going to force this defense into uncomfortable situations and really be able to turn it on. Unlike FAMU last week with Rashawn McKay, I have James Madison pulling away in this one. I have James Madison winning this one 38-13 over Southeastern Louisiana this weekend. So a big win for the Dukes this weekend. So a big win there. Incarnate Word, Sam Houston State, man. Let's see. Silent said JMU turned it on after that Nova loss. I agree, man. They've been a completely different team since they suffered that setback. LK said, "Go Grizz, man." We're gonna get to the Grizz. We're gonna get to your team, man, here in a minute. But we gotta talk about Incarnate Word versus Sam Houston State, man. This game, for me, I think has a lot more upset potential than I think some people think. And for me, I understand the strength of schedule argument for the SWAC and everything that we went through on the show. But for Sam Houston, I don't know if they've seen a team quite like Incarnate Word's offense that they're going to see this weekend. But for Sam Houston, man, we'll start with them. This team has dominated this year. I'll just put it like that, man. Over 41 points per game scored, and their defense has been solid all season long, and they've allowed less than 15 points per game. And the only game that has even been close on their schedule was that Stephen F. Austin game, which is the team Incarnate Word just beaten overtime. But the key players, man, Eric Schmidt at quarterback, man, of course, over 2,200 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. And then on top of that, the rushing attack with Jefferson at running back, over 900 yards rushing, almost 7 yards per carry, and 11 rushing touchdowns. They're going to be the key on the offensive side of the ball, man. And on the defense, they just have, for me, Sam Houston has one of the best front sevens as well, similar to James Madison, but key at the defensive line is a whole problem. Braden Clopton at safety. They have listen, this team is the exact same team that won the national title last year. Almost the exact same team that won the national title. And for me, I think this team's extremely motivated. I think they heard the doubters all going through there where they were saying their schedule isn't like ours, their schedule isn't this, their schedule isn't that. Now, for Sam Houston, the number one thing is to stop Cameron Ward. Last week, Cameron Ward had a giant game for Incarnate Word. This season, he's thrown for over 4,100 yards, 42 touchdowns, only 10 turnovers. And on top of that, he can do it with his legs as well outside the pocket if you let him get loose. But for me, I don't think Cameron Ward's got enough credit. I said it last week when I previewed the Incarnate Word Stephen F. Austin game. I think right now he's third in the Walter Payton Award race. I think he's right up there with Cole Kelly and Eric Barrier based on how he played this year. And Cameron Ward deserves a lot of respect, and he's going to be the driving factor. Listen, if Incarnate Word wants a chance to win this game, they are going to have a big game from Cameron Ward. If he doesn't play his best game, he catches a turnover bug, anything like that, Sam Houston's going to run away with this one. But also Kevin Brown at running back has to offer a little bit of balance. And then of course, man, you have to have those guys in your front get some pressure on Smith. If you can't get pressure on Eric Smith and force the Sam Houston team to be a bit one-dimensional like Stephen F. Austin did, Incarnate Word's defense is going to have a rough day because this defense allowing over 25 points per game and they're allowing over 400 yards per game, and they've not seen an offense as balanced and as with as much talent as Sam Houston has. So for me this weekend, guys, I have Sam Houston winning a close one. I think Incarnate Word keeps it close early due to their ability to score. But man, I think Sam Houston wears down that defense down the stretch. I have Sam Houston winning this game 41-30 over Incarnate Word this weekend as the number one seed moves on to the next week and they survive one more week. Let's see. Man, appreciate it, man. Thank you for tuning in. Roy says Sam Houston would be better off playing FAMU. Listen, this is a tough matchup, man. Incarnate Word is not going to be a joke for anybody. So I agree. They definitely would rather play FAMU than Incarnate Word. But man, listen, this is a game. Listen, I know my guy Dave isn't in here right now. That's my North Dakota State guy. I know his profile pictures North Dakota State, everything. Southern Illinois traveling to the Fargo Dome to take on North Dakota State. North Dakota State's a 14-point favorite, 2:30 p.m. Central Time kickoff on ESPN Plus. And listen, Southern Illinois shocked me. Listen, I picked against them last week. I did. I did not think they were going to be able to win last week. They get a huge win over South Dakota last week, 22-10, and I picked completely against them. But for me, their offense is going to have to be key, especially against this North Dakota State defense that, listen, they're allowing 12 points per game this year, guys. 85 yards rushing, less than 262 total yards allowed per game. If this Southern Illinois offense does not get going, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And of course, listen, it all starts with the run game with Javin Williams Jr., man. He's had a huge year, over 500 yards rushing, over 9 touchdowns this season. And then the other thing, man, you got to avoid turnovers, man. Listen, Nick Baker, 11 picks this year. He's got 26 touchdowns, over 3,000 yards passing. If Nick Baker turns the football over against North Dakota State, Southern Illinois will have no chance in this game. You are going to have to control the ball and counteract that powerful physical offensive attack that North Dakota State has. And also, you have to deal with that North Dakota State defense. That's going to be my biggest question mark is can they handle this defense? And I mean, they haven't seen anything like this year. I'm going to be honest with you, man. Listen, when you look at Jackson Hankey, Michael Tutsi, Jashir Cox, these guys are elite talent. I mean, Jashir Cox with 3 picks this year, over 43 tackles. These guys in the front seven too. Eli Mostert with 6.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. They have talent at every level of their defense. And I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on Southern Illinois to score this weekend because Nick Baker, great against, weaker defenses, but I just don't think he's seen anything like that. But if he's got a chance, Avante Cox and Landon Lenore at the wide receiver spot have to step up big time for Southern Illinois. But then you look at let's get to North Dakota State. There was a lot made about Quincy Patterson, man, but it looks like they've moved on to Cam Miller. And if you haven't if you haven't watched North Dakota State football since about halfway through the season and you don't know who Cam Miller is yet, I need you to go watch some film on this kid because he has taken this North Dakota State offense to another level, man. He offers a much more balance than what Quincy Patterson has been able to offer for this North Dakota State offense. And listen, he's only a sophomore. But when you look at what he's done over the past few weeks, it has been super impressive. 11 touchdowns, only 2 turnovers, completing over 73% of his passes. And he's really helped this North Dakota State offense become a bit more balanced. You already got Tamarick Williams at the running back spot, Kobe Johnson at the running back spot, and also you also got Quincy Patterson. You can put him in some packages and use his legs because he has 6 rushing touchdowns and averaging over 5 yards per carry. But for me, the key is going to be Cam Miller's play. If he can continue being as efficient, being as confident, and as accurate as he's been since he's become the starter for North Dakota State, they're going to be a very, very tough out for anyone they go up against. But looking at this game, I don't think Southern Illinois has enough on offense to score against this North Dakota State defense. I have North Dakota State winning this one 35-20 over Southern Illinois, a 15-point win for North Dakota State, just covering what the spread is right now. The second to last game, and listen, our guy Sean called the upset earlier, and I believe someone else called it in the comment. Yeah, Roy said UT Martin for the win as well. UT Martin traveling to Montana State. Montana State is a 12-point favorite, but listen, that might change. So this isn't breaking. I'm not breaking the news, but it was announced today that starting quarterback Matthew McKay for Montana State entered his name into the transfer portal tonight. I'm going to let that sink in. Montana State is a seeded team in the playoffs, and their starting quarterback transferred 2 days before the playoff game. I just need that to make sense, man. He entered his name in the transfer portal in the middle of the week before a playoff game. I haven't talked to anyone from Montana State. I really just heard about the story right before I came live, so I need to do some digging, but I would imagine something had to happen. There's no way a kid who was the starting quarterback all season long, 16 touchdowns, 3 picks, over 2,000 yards passing, just gets up and dips right before your playoff game. You can't convince me that's normal or that something didn't happen, because there is no way if I'm a starting quarterback, I'm dipping right before I got my team seated. If Montana State wins this game, guys, they have a chance to go to Sam Houston and knock off the defending national champions. And I can't put my finger on it about why that would happen. So now you're looking, I'm not sure who's going to be the starter, but I would imagine it's probably going to be Tucker Rovig or Casey Bowman. Both of these guys have played limited snaps, each of them only played in just over 3 games. I believe Rovig played in 5 in limited action. But listen, I saw some comments from some Montana State fans before I came off. They're confident in their QB room, but for me, it has to be a bad sign that Matthew McKay dipped out literally barely 48 hours before your playoff game. So what I think that's actually going to mean is that Isaiah Afonso, a running back, is going to have a big game. Listen, over 1,200 yards rushing, 8 rushing touchdowns. Also look at Tommy Merlot at the running back spot, 4 rushing touchdowns, and also Elijah Elliott on the ground, averaging over 5 yards per carry. Montana State, for me, is going to have to run the football now. They're averaging over 218 yards per game. But without their starting quarterback, man, I have major, major concerns about this offense. And I can't tell you guys why that he transferred. But luckily, on the defensive side of the ball, they got some game changers. Daniel Hardy is a name that I want you guys to watch very, very closely this weekend. 10.5 sacks, 17 tackles for loss, 5 QB hurries, 3 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and 53 total tackles. Daniel Hardy is a problem for this defense of Montana State. Also, Troy Anderson up there as well with over 111 total tackles, 2 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss. If Montana State, for me, without their starting quarterback, wants a chance to win this game, they're going to have to keep it low scoring. Now, luckily, UT Martin doesn't have an all-world defense, man, allowing over 24 points per game. Also, they're allowing over 350 yards per game. So maybe Montana State can score enough because they got home field advantage. UT Martin's got to go all the way up to Montana. But I am concerned about that because when you look at UT Martin's offense, if they can get things rolling, they can make it very interesting up there in Montana as they average over 400 yards per game. And on top of that, they average over 31 points per game. But the key for UT Martin, one, is going to be Keon Howard at quarterback, being a playmaker, 10 rushing touchdowns this year, 15 passing, over 1,800 yards passing. Keon Howard is going to have to protect the ball and be a playmaker for this offense. On top of that, Zach Wallace and Peyton Logan are going to have big days on the ground. Wallace and Logan this year have combined for over 1,700 yards, 19 rushing touchdowns, and they're both averaging over 5.5 yards per carry. If UT Martin can stay balanced, control the ball, and put some pressure on whichever quarterback starts this weekend for Montana State, I think UT Martin has a great chance to win this. Now, listen, I'll be completely transparent. I was going to pick Montana State. I am worried about where the morale of the team is right now in terms of without their starting quarterback, and also the lack of experience going into a playoff game really concerns me. So for me, I'm going UT Martin with the upset, a low scoring game. I have UT Martin winning this game 23-20 over Montana State in a big upset this weekend up there. Up north, man, it's going to be freezing up there, and I'm not envy of the fans up there, man. But listen, last game before I take y'all's questions and roll out of here, man. South Dakota State traveling to Sacramento State. And this is one of the rare cases where the seeded team is the underdog, as South Dakota State is an 8-point underdog. And that doesn't surprise me, man. When you look at what they did last weekend, let me put it in perspective. They beat UC Davis 56-24. And when you look at how they did it, that's why I'm worried about this game, man. 446 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, and they ran it absolutely smack down the throat of UC Davis. And so if you're Sacramento State, you are going to have to play some defense, man. You cannot allow this team to run the football. If you allow South Dakota State to get loose and run the football, you are going to have major, major problems. And it, of course, all starts with Pierre Strong, man. Over 1,500 rushing yards, over 7 yards per carry, and 16 touchdowns. And listen, he was a Walter Payton All-American, finalist last year. And then on top of that, Isaiah Davis has really emerged as a sophomore running back that he's only played 4 games. I mean, he's really hasn't played that much, but over 400 yards, 9 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. Last weekend, they had so many running backs average, they were averaging stupid yards per carry. I mean, 10 to 12 yards per carry. For me, Sacramento State has to play good on the defensive side of the football, or they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, when you look at Sac State, man, 9-2, won the Big Sky, got the automatic bid, got seeded. Now, when you look at this team, their offense is not super explosive through the air. They're going to try to run the football. O'Hara at quarterback with his legs can make a lot of plays. 9 rushing touchdowns, over 600 yards rushing. But then you also got Scadbo and Perkison at running back, both combined for over 700 yards rushing, 7 rushing touchdowns. If I'm Sac State, you have to match the rushing ability of a South Dakota State. If you allow them to run the football down your throat and allow them to control the line of scrimmage and allow them to let their defense play loose with no pressure, Sacramento State's in a lot of trouble. And for me, looking at this matchup, I said my dark horse this year was South Dakota State. And when I look at how motivated and fast they looked last week, I see a tough time of seeing Sacramento State stopping the South Dakota rushing attack. So for me, I think South Dakota State really and truly makes another statement performance this weekend. I have South Dakota State winning this one 38-17 over Sac State. and they cover that 8-point spread, even as not the ranked team this year, man. So let me go through these one last time, man. I have Villanova over Holy Cross, Eastern Washington upsetting Montana, Kennesaw State upsetting ETSU, James Madison blowing out Southeastern. I have Sam Houston State winning a close one over Incarnate Word. I have North Dakota State winning a big one over Southern Illinois. I have UT Martin upsetting Montana State. And I have South Dakota State pulling out the win over Sac State. And that will be my second round official predictions. Listen, I went 5-3 last week. It was a tough one. There's a few games I felt like I shouldn't have lost, but I got into it on the recap, man. Let's see. Let me catch up on some of these comments. Clemson lost out at the wide receiver that plays for UT Martin. Yeah, they did. That they really, really wanted him too. The Gibbs boys can play. Jabari Gibbs was shunned Clemson for UT Martin. And listen, he's been a top playmaker, both of them. In North Dakota State got a $15 million donation today for an indoor practice facility from an alum. That's great, man. Ralph, I did not hear about that. But listen, any FCS schools that are getting donations like that to build new facilities, I am all for, because I think the arms race in terms of facilities is really, really about to heat up around the country. We'll see. Kevin Matt says, so they're just going to play the FCS playoffs on the streaming service, and that's it. Kevin, I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but off the top of my head, I'll have to look after this. I believe after this round, they all move to, I believe, like ESPN2 or U or something like that. I believe they get off the ESPN Plus after this round, Kevin. And then, of course, the national championship, of course, will be on a much bigger channel. I think it's just the first two rounds are right in the middle of rivalry week and conference championship week. So I feel like they didn't have really room to put them on any of the main ESPN stations. So I think after this round, Kevin, you're going to see a lot of those games move away from ESPN Plus onto bigger channels. But guys, those are my second round FCS playoff picks, man. Listen, there's a lot of big games. For me, the best matchups to watch this weekend, in my opinion, I think the Eastern Washington Montana game probably is the game of the week for me. I think this is going to be just one of those games that you're going to have to tune into tomorrow night on Friday. And then I also really, really think that Incarnate Word and Sam Houston State could be a sneaky game to watch, man. I think that Incarnate Word offense with Cameron Ward could really give Sam Houston some problems if they can turn this thing into a shootout. Now, it's going to be tough to score against that Sam Houston defense, but I think Incarnate Word is going to give them a lot of problems with their offensive diversity and how they can attack that defense. And then, of course, I think the whole storyline surrounding Montana State losing their starting quarterback only like 48 hours ahead of game time is going to be a huge storyline. Who's going to start at Montana State, and what does that do to the team, man? I mean, if I'm on that team, I have to feel some type of way that one of my leaders on that team entered the transfer portal right when we have a chance to go potentially work our way to compete for a national championship. I think that for me, I think that raised a lot of question marks for this team. So for me, I think UT Martin, Montana State is going to be just shrouded in storylines this weekend. So those are the three games I think are going to be some of the top games to watch this weekend, man. But listen, guys, I'll be back Sunday night with a recap of all the round two action, man. Make sure to turn on your post notifications if you're new. Make sure to subscribe and listen. Next week, we're starting interviews with players, man. Listen, we got some huge interviews, man. And listen, I'm working on some things. Work. The two players that I have confirmed for me right now is D. Anderson from Alabama A&M. He will be coming on the show next week, and that'll be dropping. We're going to be talking his path from LSU to Oklahoma State to Alabama A&M, his 1 year in the SWAC, what it was like to play with the Keel Glass. We're going to break all that down right here on the Bluebloods. And then also Jaleel McLaughlin coming in from Youngstown State, man. He's going to come in, talk about this season, talk about what Youngstown State has got going on. And so make sure to tune into those interviews, man. We've got to support these players. Make sure to turn your post notifications on for that and check out those interviews. And I got a lot more FCS players in the work coming on the show talking about various schools. So your favorite school will be represented. Working on getting Eric Barrier back on the show, and also working on getting some return guests to kind of see where they are before they head off to the NFL draft potentially, man. So there's a lot of content coming for the Bluebloods Also, conference championship previews finish up tomorrow. Make sure to go check out that playlist to check out all the latest news. And of course, go check out our coaching carousel playlist for all the latest coaching news around college football, guys. But listen, y'all have a great Thursday night. I'll see y'all tomorrow with a bunch of episodes dropping. But for right now, guys, the Blue Bloods are out.